Many times online, I have seen angelfish being kept with goldfish in the same aquarium. My initial reaction was that this combination is a bad idea. In this video, I want to discuss if these two species can be safely kept together and if I would personally ever try this combination myself. Hi there, it's Connor. Today I want to talk about mixing angelfish and goldfish together. This topic caught my attention after many months ago going to a local fish store and seeing beautiful giant Oranda goldfish, which are a fancy goldfish type, mixed in with one adult angelfish in a tank. And initially I was like, oh, I didn't think this is something that should be done. So I had done research on that previously and kind of wanted to make a video on that. Over the months too after that, I had seen many examples, or at least several examples of this combination being kept on Instagram. And then if you look on YouTube, you can find many examples of people doing this. When I saw them at the store though, it was probably about 5 or 6 jumbo-sized Orandas, 6+ inches, maybe even 7, 8 inches, some of them, being mixed in a very large tank. The tank was probably, over 150 gallons, definitely maybe 200 gallons or so, mixed with angelfish. And there was only one angelfish. It was a large gold angelfish in the tank, but everyone seemed healthy, so that kind of definitely piqued my interest, and I was kind of surprised about it. If you do go online and look up videos and read discussions about this topic of mixing these species, pretty much unanimously everyone recommends against keeping them together. And there's two main reasons for that. The parameter differences, like temperature and stuff differing for the species, and then aggression leading to injuries between the species. So I did want to briefly touch on my experience. So I've never kept these species together and never thought I should. This video kind of led me to do some deeper research on it, so we'll get into that in a sec. As far as my experience with both species, I've kept both of them. Right now, I'm not actually keeping any angelfish. Last ones I had got pretty aggressive and I ended up rehoming them. But over the past few years, I've pretty much been keeping them most of the time. And then I also kept 2 as a kid successfully. As far as goldfish, I've been keeping Orandas, which are a type of fancy goldfish, the ones with large heads. And I've been keeping them for about the past 2 years. So now anyway, I want to get into the bulk of the video and really discuss if we can mix them together and what are the issues in mixing them. Why does everyone online say that you shouldn't mix them, and what difficulties do we have if we want to mix them? So the first here we're going to discuss is parameter differences. So this is pH, temperature, hardness, anything like that. I'll just go over the stats of each of them first real quick and put them on the screen here. So for angelfish, the pH is from 6.0 to 7.4. Temperature from 76 to 86 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 24 to 30 degrees Celsius. Hardness from 0 to 15 degrees general hardness. And for goldfish, and though these first is for fancy goldfish, a pH of 6.5 to 7.5 is recommended. Temperature from 65 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit, or 18 to 24 degrees Celsius. And hardness of about 4 to 20 degrees general hardness. Now online, you'll generally find different parameters, slight variations for all the species. So you got to take them with a grain of salt. Those are the ones I put on my website personally though, that I think are the most accurate from all the sources I gathered. And I will say that for goldfish, if you have a more like a pond goldfish or a common goldfish or one of the more fast swimming ones, the pH range tends to be larger, more probably around 6 to 8. And the temperature tends to go from 65 to 72 degrees Fahrenheit, so not as warm. I will say though, I'm going to talk more about fancy goldfish here because that's more of my experience. And I think if I were to mix them, that's what I'd be more interested in, because I just think with the flowing fantails, they really look beautiful with angelfish, especially if you get some of the veil angelfish. I think it looks really cool. I really would probably have no desire to mix more like common goldfish or pond goldfish with angelfish. Anyway though, if we look at all those stats, pH is not an issue. There's definitely a range in there. Honestly, just aiming for right in the middle towards 7, you'll be fine, but any pretty much average range will be fine. So temperature's not it. Hardness, they pretty much have similar hardnesses, so not an issue there. It's really temperature where it becomes an issue. And you'll see angelfish, the lowest they go to is 76 degrees Fahrenheit. And for fancy goldfish, the highest they go to is 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, kind of caveat to that, which is kind of annoying, is for fancy goldfish, I've really, and specifically Orandas, because that's what I've kept, I've seen all sorts of recommendations online. Ones that say you shouldn't let them get over 72 degrees Fahrenheit, and ones that say they can get up to 78 degrees Fahrenheit or even 80 degrees Fahrenheit. And some of those are even sources that I would consider pretty reliable. So it really does depend. I do think fancy goldfish probably have been bred and raised to handle warmer temperatures, although they might not live as long. I definitely think they can handle like a 78 probably fine, although I personally wouldn't keep them there. I generally keep mine around 72, I'd say. But anyway, kind of a tangent there. Pretty much right around 75, 76 is kind of like that middle ground. I'd say you'll probably have more success keeping the goldfish slightly higher. So if I were to do this, I'd probably say keep it at right around maybe 76, give or take a degree. Now, this definitely isn't optimal for both species because you're on the lower range of angelfish and you're on the upper range of goldfish, maybe even out of the range you really want to be at. So there's going to be a little stress on either one of them, and maybe even for both. I definitely think it's doable. I definitely think that you could keep them right at that 76 degrees and they would both be healthy, but it is going to put some stress on them and it's probably not ideal. So doable but not ideal is kind of the summary there. But I would say that long term, I don't really think that's going to cause you any main issues. So I would say that's probably not the reason not to mix them, although it's something to take into consideration. And next I want to talk about aggression differences. And this personally is the main reason I wouldn't mix them. So the difference between the species is angelfish, they're cichlids, so they are kind of territorial. They aren't known to be super aggressive, they're rated as semi-aggressive, and I'll say some can be very aggressive, some can be completely peaceful and won't bother anybody. I have noticed that most of the aggression with angelfish tends to be between their own species, angelfish attacking other angelfish, but they definitely pick on other fish or fin nip them a little bit. They are territorial, so if they stake out an area in the tank, other fish swim into that, they might chase them out of there. And for goldfish, they're very peaceful. They really don't bother anyone. They do like to swim all over the tank though, so that's kind of where you get into an issue if angelfish pick an area of that tank and they don't want other fish in there and the goldfish just swim into there, they might get pecked at and just might get fins injured, or if they're like in a rand, their wen injured, or if they're crown skull or something. Basically any of their features could definitely get injured pretty easily. And then with fancy goldfish having very long fins, the fin nipping is especially, they're especially susceptible to fin nipping. So that's where it gets kind of dangerous. Is the fin getting injured gonna lead to the problems right away? No, but eventually, the more injuries they get, the more likely they are to get disease. So that's kind of the big risk there. It's just them getting injured over time and, having their fins injured and not being able to fully heal up, and then, eventually getting something like fin rot or some other bacterial infection. And so this is just my main reason for concern. I personally actually had a similar experience. I mixed fancy goldfish with yo-yo loaches because I had a snail problem. Eventually, as the yo-yo loaches grew, they ended up picking on my Aranda's wen a little bit, and they were just like nibbling on it, and then that led to an infection, and after a long battle, eventually death. So the fact that I know angelfish definitely could pick on them and cause small injuries like them, there's a big risk there of them just getting injuries, and with how expensive fancy goldfish are when they get large, it's not something I would personally do. You could do it with smaller fancy goldfish, then they're pretty cheap then, but if you get a fancy goldfish that lived many years and got large, or you bought one that was a good price, I know I personally would not mix that or do a risk, even now that I had the yo-yo loach experience. But those are the main kind of topics that articles, discussions mention of not wanting to mix the two species together. So I just kind of wrap it up with, would I ever do it? And then follow up with, if you did want to do it, what tips do I have? So first here, would I ever mix them? The answer is no, I never would. I do think it's a really cool looking mix, especially if you get like the super veil angels and you get some fancy goldfish like Arandas or fantail with the really long, beautiful tails. I think you get the right colors together. There's a few examples here, but I think it can be really beautiful. But I just know that once you get fancy goldfish living for a few years, they get very large, very beautiful, and they're worth a good amount of money then. And if you want to buy one large, you're going to be paying a decent little price for it usually. For that, it's definitely just not worth it. And even for the ethical reasons, I would hate for them to get injured, So it's not something I would ever do. I just think it's too high of a risk of them getting injured and leading to health problems eventually. But now, if you look online, there are many examples of people keeping them together, and there are even some that have been successful. One that I've kind of followed on Instagram for a while is this outdoor pond. Call it a pond. They basically built a tank, but it's in the ground. And it's very large, but they have a ton of fancy goldfish, a lot of verandas, and a few others, and then a good amount of angelfish in the tank too. That's just one example of that is successful. I'm sure for people who have tried this, there's a lot that haven't been successful, but I'm sure there's also ones that have been successful besides this one, and I'm sure it's possible. Even though I wouldn't do it, I definitely think you could mix them, and you could, given the right conditions, right fish, you could make it work. But I just wanted to talk about tips for if you want to make it work, although I still advise against it. And what can we learn from this example of this pond outdoor tank? And the first one is a very, very large tank. You see, this is, I have no idea how many gallons. Could even be like upwards of 500 gallons or maybe 300 gallons, but it's a lot of water there. So that's the first thing, is you're going to want a very, very large space. That's going to help the angelfish not be so aggressive and not worry about picking on any goldfish, and just be able to have an easier way to stake their own territory, and probably just not bother other fish nearly as much. And then next that we can learn from them is many angelfish and many more goldfish. So I think that is something that if you are mixing any type of aggressive fish or fish that may have risks of bothering others, just having a lot of fish will reduce aggression, because not one is going to be picked on. And then there's so much more going on that I think fish are going to be less likely to bother. They're going to be more probably pick an area, and that's going to be their area, and not be going around harassing fish. If you have a smaller tank, then there's not as much to do, and they're always going to see the other fish, so they're much more likely to pick on the fish, and much more likely for fish to end up in their territory. Additional tips that if I were to try this, I would try to incorporate it, is just know the angelfish beforehand. Have them keeping them for a while in their own tank, and just know that they're overall not too aggressive. That's a big one. I've had recently, in the past few years of getting back in the hobby, most of the angelfish I've gotten have been pretty aggressive, at least to other angelfish, although I've only kept them in pairs mainly. But I would just know the angelfish, know that they're not going to really pick on other fish, and even maybe be peaceful between each other. That'll definitely help for success if you can do that. Next is to go for active goldfish. I have seen some verandas that like to just kind of sit on the bottom and chill out more, versus ones that are always active, always swimming around. If you can know them and know that they're always going to be very active, that's going to be good. I think you just want a lot of activity in the tank. That kind of goes back to mainly angelfish, many more goldfish. I think a lot of activity in the tank is going to also prevent just like someone from being picked on, because there's so much going on at once. And I would say stay away from the fanciest goldfish. And by that I mean some of the crown pearl skulls that have like the bubbles on their head, or bubble eyes, or those that have really giant wens, because they're going to be easy to get picked on those areas. And if they get injured, they're probably much more likely for infection. So, maybe I would say go for stuff like ryokins, fantails, and verandas that don't have really giant wens, ones that are more compact. I think that's kind of what I would do, and just keep that in mind. So anyway, that does wrap up the video. Those are kind of my thoughts. Once again, it's not a combination that I would keep. It's one, going into this video I thought was bad, and then after doing more further research, I also disagree. I don't think it's worth the risk. Can you do it? Yeah, I think people can do it. I think people have been successful, and I gave you some tips there for what I would try if I wanted to try and make successful, but it's personally not something I would ever want to risk. And I just think they're fish better kept separate. So that's kind of my thoughts on the topic. But anyway, I want to thank everyone for watching. If there's any questions at all or any further thoughts, definitely let me know. I'd love to hear them and get back to you. And if you did enjoy the video, thought it was helpful, likes on it and subscription to my channel are always very appreciated. And anyway, thanks again for watching, and I'll catch everyone next time.